There was a difference. Well, I think MDMA is, I don't want to trash MDMA. It's changed a lot of people's lives and saved relationships and so forth and so on. But to me, it's a perfect example of why you're better off taking plants. Because here was this drug, somebody invented it, they gave it to a few friends, it seemed to be wonderful for solving personal problems. So without any collection of human data, this thing becomes an item in the underground. Well, and so then thousands of people take it. The psychological effects seem completely benign. It's a wonderful thing. The physiological effects, it's a very disturbing profile. It isn't exactly as you said. It's not that it destroys the serotonin receptor site. It's that neurons, are covered by these very delicate structures called dendritic spines. Now, nobody knows what dendritic spines do, but every neuron in your body has them. And when you take MDMA, it mows them down. They go away. Now, so then you get two schools of thought. One says, well, my God, anything impacting the physical brain that dramatically should be stayed away from. And the other camp says, well, do you see any behavioral changes in people who take MDMA a lot? Do you see any physical destruction, seizures, blindness, anything? And the answer is no. So they say, well, here we have histological evidence that this thing is making major physiological changes in the dendrites, and no behavioral sequela to back up that this is of any consequence. Well, my position, being basically a very conservative person, is in that case, wait. You know, they're doing work on this in a dozen labs around the country. They'll figure it out. In the meantime, take psilocybin or mescaline or something else that has been sanctioned, because you just do not want to insult the physical brain. You know, that's the whole name of the game. You have to keep the brain in good shape. Yeah.
Could we go back to his question? Once you're past the trigger dose, is it worthwhile to start to step up to 650?
That's where we were talking. That's why we started talking about LD50, because I wanted to explain to you that taking a drug like a compound like psilocybin, if the effective dose is 20 milligrams for somebody who weighs 135 pounds, well, then looking at the pharmacological data, they should be able to take 2,000 milligrams without any trouble at all. That's 1,000 times. That's 100 times more. But in fact, what happens is, as you raise the dose, is that the psychological presentation becomes unbearable. It becomes so strange that you fear for your sanity, in a good old Edgar Allan Poe-ish phrase, you know. It gets stranger and stranger. And, you know, I've talked to pretty naive people who have overdosed. Usually the way these overdose situations occur is people are gathering mushrooms in the wild, and they start eating them, and then they just keep eating them. And then they realize they've eaten 4 times more than the effective dose. And this is where you get into places where you don't know what to say. Because if you tell people, they'll throw a net over you. But you want to say, because you're so personally disturbed. This is where the flying saucers land and the rectal examinations begin, and you're told that you're the Messiah, and it becomes quirkier and quirkier. So I think you have to, I'm very admiring of people who can take very high doses, but I find it quite challenging enough in the 5 to 7 gram range. A friend of mine says of psilocybin that every time he takes it, he tries to stand more, meaning more of the vision, because it is filtering itself. It's definitely filtering itself. This is why beginners almost never have bad trips, because somebody in there looks at your clipboard and says, oh, this guy has never done this before, so lay off the rough stuff. Just, bring him through the standard number. It's the people who consider themselves experienced, who've done it 20, 30, 40 times, says, we can take the gloves off with this guy. And it always amazes me. I sometimes meet people who say, I've taken mushrooms 50 times and I've never had a bad trip. And I think, lucky soul. Because when it goes left, it's hard. It's hard. You have to really then, do not your mantras bungle is the best advice I can give you, because you need to steer back toward the mainstream. Now, maybe at this point, this is a good point at which to talk about what do you do when the going gets rough. There are two things, at least, that you can do that are very effective. The first is, and it's a very simple thing, but people in our culture seem to be resistant to this, is you sing. You force air into your lungs and body, and you chant. You sing anything you want, and it will radically alter the parameters. There's a certain place in psilocybin that is my bête noire, which I call the meat locker. And I don't like this place, and meat locker is a mild term for it. It's more like, the morgue for the homicide unit or something. Whenever I start drifting that way, I sing, and then you can navigate through it. The other thing you can do, although this is sometimes trickier, is smoke cannabis. This is what those bombers are for that you rolled in the first hour while you were waiting for it to come on. Is as soon as it begins to press in some really invasive or alarming way, just take a couple of hits of the good and chant, and then you can bring it back on track. And also talk to it. Don't be afraid to say, I don't like this. Take it off me. It's too peculiar. I'm not ready for this. It says, oh, sorry, back to dancing mice. Yeah.
Do different batches of mushrooms have wildly varying concentrations of psilocybin?
Well, there hasn't been a lot of work on this. Michael Buckley at Evergreen College years ago grew Stropharia cubensis by the method that's described in my book, the book I wrote with my brother. And what they discovered, psilocybin is 4-phosphoryloxy-N,N-dimethyltryptamine. That phosphorus group is removed as soon as it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So really, what's active is a simpler compound called psilocin, and psilocin lacks the phosphorus attachment. And what they discovered was that in the early flushes, the psilocybin ratio is high and the psilocin ratio is low, and you all know what a flush is, right? And in the later flushes, the psilocin level rises and the psilocybin level drops, so really the two together stay remarkably stable throughout the life of the organism. Something worth mentioning, I suppose it's worth mentioning, is when I was into my extraterrestrial phase, when I was assuming that the mushroom was an extraterrestrial, either the extraterrestrial itself or something designed by some kind of an extraterrestrial, it was very interesting to me that psilocybin is, as I said, 4-phosphoryloxy-N,N-dimethyltryptamine. It is the only 4-substituted indole in nature. The only one. Well, if you were to search for evidence of extraterrestrial tampering with the biome of this planet, what you would look for is a unique compound occurring in one life form and no other. Here it is, folks. This phosphorus group is unique. And I've never read any description or discussion of what the evolutionary history of that, why it would appear in an organism like that and not in any other. That's just an aside, because I'm always searching for the thumbprint of the alien. There may not be an alien thumbprint, but the phosphorus group attached to psilocybin is a good candidate for it. Yeah.